morning. Is that Mr. Abdul Mohtat, please?
That he's out. He's not here.
That's not you?
Yes.
Not Mr. Abdul Mohtat?
No.
This is not you?
Oh, it's...
Looks like you.
Yeah, from...
But after a few minutes, he confirmed his identity. I mean, the concern... Oh, good morning.
Almost every war produces terrible atrocities. The Second World War, Bosnia, Rwanda and the Afghan Civil War. We'd like to think Australia shares none of the guilt for those crimes, but the presence here of three very senior former members of the Afghan regime raises serious questions about our government's commitment to pursue men accused of terrible crimes against their countrymen. Mark Cochrane reports.
Australia is a country built on migration. Our liberal society serves as a haven for those seeking refuge from persecution. But Australia may also be sheltering those who seek refuge from justice. One group to arrive here in recent years has come from Afghanistan. Refugees from a conflict that's left more than 1.5 million dead. But the Afghans say they've been followed here by those responsible for the conflict. Men the refugees accuse of war crimes. Tonight, we'll reveal the presence in Australia of Afghanistan's former Vice President, a Secret Service General and a Colonel, all accused of war crimes. Oh, good morning. Is that Mr. Abdul Mohtat, please?
That he's out. He's not here.
That's not... This is not you?
Oh, it's...
Looks like you.
Yeah, from...
But after a few minutes, after more than a decade of war, Soviet troops finally abandoned Afghanistan in 1989. The Soviet-backed regime of President Najibullah had shown no mercy in suppressing fellow Afghans. According to leading Afghan political expert Dr. William Maley, the Najibullah regime displayed a flair for the systematic murder of the civilian population in its pursuit of the Mujahideen resistance.
In rural Afghanistan, the most extensive form of atrocity was the use of the technology of modern warfare against defenceless civilians. And there's abundant evidence of bombing of targets which were obviously civilian rather than military in character, of sweeps by troops resulting in massacres of the civilian population in areas from which it was thought Mujahideen groups had come.
With their Soviet backers gone, the Najibullah regime's days were numbered. The leaders began looking for safe havens abroad. Afghan refugees here warned then Immigration Minister Robert Ray that Australia was a favoured destination. In May 1989, Senator Ray promised that the warning had been passed on to the relevant overseas posts, so that if required, they could act on the information provided. The refugees were key figures of the Najibullah regime, keen to trade intelligence for Western passports.
For the practice of systematic terror against the civilian population, particularly in urban areas. It is a classic political police force. They tortured people in horrific ways. One has reports of electric shock being used, of people being thrust into cells containing dismembered body parts, of people having chemicals injected into their veins against their wishes. It was bludgeoning people to death, basically. Thousands of people in Afghanistan disappeared, and their relatives don't know what happened to them.
Najibullah's presidential guard put up little resistance to the Mujahideen forces that swept into the capital, Kabul. A key Najibullah figure in the formal handover of power to Mujahideen leader Rabbani was this man, Vice President Abdulhamid Mohtat. Like Miakil, he fled to India and applied for refugee status. Now in Australia on a temporary visa, he's proved to be an elusive figure, moving between Perth and Sydney.
If you like, you
Mohtat is allegedly assessing Australia's potential as a permanent haven for himself and other members of Najibullah's cabinet. You're not Mr. Abdul Mohtat?
No.
This is not you?
Oh, it's...
Looks like you.
Yeah, from...
But after a few minutes, he confirmed his identity. I mean, the concern in Australia is from members of the Afghan community here,
Yeah.
who want to know how you, as a former deputy president,
Yes.
from the Najibullah government,
Yes.
can be able to enter Australia.
Why just I cannot come to Australia? What is the reason?
Well, they feel as a member of the Najibullah government.
What
perhaps,
does it mean to know I was the member of Dr. Najibullah's government? What is the reason?
Well, the reason is that they claim that
Yeah.
you should be brought to account
Well,
for events during the war.
Huh?
For events
Who
during
says
the war. Several people from the Afghan community.
Well, I think that no, this is the claim that this is from the claim they are pretending. But I must tell you that I was the only person in the government of Afghanistan to prepare everything to hand over power to present government of Afghanistan, Mr. Rabbani.
He soon produced some photographs, evidence, he said, of his alliance with the Mujahideen.
Mr. Masood and me working regarding the how to to overthrow the government, how to collapse.
But this is you negotiating a surrender.
Not
Is
before,
it?
before that. You
Before,
know?
before your government
Before
surrendered.
that, before, yeah, yes.
Yes.
This is the talk that my son together.
This is you again?
Well, let me. This is President Rabbani. My meeting personally with President Rabbani.
Abdul Mohtat did far more than just pose for photographs. Prior to his appointment as Vice President, he was Ambassador to Japan and briefly non-resident Ambassador to Australia. But he had another, far more secretive role, reporting to the security service HUD. We've obtained these HUD documents from the Tokyo embassy, reports from Mohtat back to Kabul, detailing the activities of Mujahideen supporters abroad. In this document, he named 9 prominent Afghans in exile who opposed Najibullah. Mohtat endorsed calls for the Kabul supporters of these men to be eradicated as soon as possible. But that's your signature.
No, any document, if it goes from the embassy, should be signed, should be the...
But you put your name to it. So you're saying that the Afghan Secret Service man in the embassy wrote those documents?
No, just that, yes.
HUD.
Yes, this
The
is
HUD man.
This is the HUD means, yes.
But it's your signature on a hard document.
No,
I would not have liked to be a member of the families in Kabul of any of the individuals who were named in that letter. The consequences for them could have been catastrophic.
Finally, there was one sensitive issue Abdul Mohtat wouldn't discuss. Details of a meeting with Australia's intelligence services.
You should ask your own security, not me.
Did they offer you?
No, you should ask.
Did they offer you
thank
Australian passport?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
The call to prayer. For Afghans, this is a prayer for the dead. The community is at flashpoint over the government's apparent unwillingness to investigate their claims. Afghan Australians want action, here and now.
If they don't listen to our cries, I'm quite sure that there is going to be a lot happening. With due respect to humanity, there would be violation amongst the community, which I think everyone would be affected by it.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, they're going to physically abuse them. They will abuse them in any way they could.
So if the Australian government...
If the Australian government does not listen and do something about it, the Afghans will naturally do it themselves.
We await the Australian government's response. Mark Corcoran reporting. Is our health system in crisis? On Monday night, we brought you the story of 3 senior officials of Afghanistan's deposed Najibullah regime who've entered Australia despite their close links to the feared Afghan secret police, HUD. The local Afghan community called on the federal government to investigate allegations that the three were responsible for war crimes and had entered the country with the blessing of Australia's intelligence services. Entered the country with the blessing of Australia's intelligence services. A lot has happened since Monday, as Mark Cork...
Abdulhamid Mohtat, formerly Afghanistan's vice president. He'd also secretly worked for HUD while serving as ambassador to Japan and Australia. He arrived here on a temporary visa and had met with Australian intelligence officials. Then there was the former... On Tuesday, in response to our report, Foreign Minister Gareth Evans assured Parliament that the intelligence services had the matter in hand.
The allegations in question are known to the Australian security authorities and they are being investigated at the moment. At this stage, it's not possible to add anything further. No, it's not possible to add anything further to that information at this stage.
On Wednesday, Immigration Minister Nick Bolkus shed more light on the issue.
The identity of the two persons named has been established, but not the third who was named. The department, I must say, has refused an onshore application for refugee status from one of the persons named. However, a review application is still under consideration by the Refugee Review Tribunal. As Senator Evans indicated yesterday, these matters are being investigated by government, and as those investigations develop, I might have more to offer you.
As the government tries to figure out what's going on, one of the men named in our story has fled Australia. On Wednesday, former Vice President Abdul Mohtat touched down in New Delhi, India. Yesterday, he told the 7:30 report that fear of imprisonment over the allegations raised in our story had prompted his departure. But he claims he'll be back in 2 months to defend his reputation. Meanwhile, Afghanistan calls from Afghans here for an Australian government report. The Afghan government said it
fully supports the concern of the Australian Afghan community about the presence of such individuals on Australian soil. These men should be called upon to answer for the role that they played in the running of the then Soviet-installed puppet regime and its criminal activities.
The Afghan government also called on Canberra to reveal
the identity of those senior members of HUD, the Afghan Secret Service, who are alleged to have been recruited to spy for Australia, and under which category of the Australian migration program they were admitted to Australia.
Allegations of senior HUD